playing with my mama. Going like, not going. Now what you gonna do about that? Not going.
All right, man, let's talk about this. Because at this point, we got to be honest, this is starting to look different for 50. No, I'm not saying 50 can't respond. I'm not saying he's scared. I'm not saying he's done. But what I'm saying is this, the way this played out, it doesn't look like the usual 50 Cent situation, with all those trolls and memes. And that's why people are actually paying attention this time, So, boom, let's rewind and see what's going on. The whole thing really shifted the moment Tiny got mentioned. And that's when the temperature changed. You can troll another rapper all day. That's normal, that's hip-hop. That's entertainment, but once you start to bring someone's wife into the public, especially repeatedly, now it's not just competitive, it's personal there, And that's where 50 Cent might have miscalculated the steps because, T.I. didn't respond with a caption. He didn't respond with a meme. He went straight to the boot, that's important in music, in rap, in hip-hop. He chose music, he chose bars, he chose direct shots at 50. And not just one record, multiple. Tells you something, that tells you this wasn't for engagement. It wasn't for trending. And whether you like T.I. or not, you gotta admit it, This is the traditional way to handle rap conflicts, rap beefs. It didn't stop with T.I., King jumped in his son, then Demani drops Miss Jackson, and that's when the optics changed completely, because now it's not just rapper versus rapper, it's 50 versus our entire family. And that family is unified. And listen, we have seen rap beefs before. We have seen crews jump in. We have seen labels back artists and rappers and so on. But, seeing sons step up publicly to defend their mom, that it's different. That's a different level, So some people saying it's messy, some saying the kids shouldn't be involved. But let's be real, man. From their perspective, their mom was mentioned, so they're stepping in. And the internet noticed that, And here's the real issue for 50. He hasn't stepped in the boot as yet. And that's what people are stuck on because 50's whole legacy includes being battle ready in his prime. He wasn't ducking smoke. He was dropping records back then, strategic ones. Type back in the day was, vicious. But right now it's memes, it's sarcasm, it's I don't need to respond type of energy. And that's where the conversation flips because hip-hop still respect bars, This is like the foundation of hip-hop and rap music in general. You can dominate Instagram, you can dominate headlines, but if someone drops multiple diss tracks and you don't respond musically and you're in the genre, you're in rap, you're in hip-hop, you're in the industry, people start asking questions, And you can see it in the polls, you can see it in comments. Even fans who rock with 50 are saying like, okay, but when are you gonna rap? When are you gonna drop some bars? All right, now let's analyze this properly. Could it be that 50, is playing the long game? Absolutely, that's possible. Could he be baiting them? It's 50. It could be just basically waiting it out, And he might drop something, you never know. But could he be waiting for the perfect time? And, that's very on brand for him, That's something that's possible. But perception matters. Right now, the perception is that T.I. and his sons, they handled it in the booth, and 50 handled it on the social media. And that's not the same way. That's two different levels. Another thing is that this isn't just about bars. This is about optics. When one man is going back and forth, that's one thing. When a whole family stands together publicly, that changes the energy. It doesn't look like trolling anymore. It looks like someone poked the wrong person. And that's why people are saying that this might be the first time in a long time where 50 looks slightly outnumbered. Now let's talk legacy for a second. T.I. doesn't need this for relevancy. His catalog already speaks. 50 doesn't need it either for his career is already cemented. But reputation, that matters. Those can shift real quickly. 50 built a reputation on not backing down, on controlling narratives and humiliating opponents strategically. But this situation actually feels less control. Every time he posts, another response is dropped. Every time he jokes, another diss record surfaces, and that's momentum for T.I. And right now, momentum looks like it's on the Harris side, Of course, if 50 drops a track tomorrow, everything resets. The culture will listen, but until that happens, the conversation stays where it is, and that conversation is simple. Mention the wife, the husband responded with bars, the sons responded with bars, and you haven't said anything, you haven't touched the boot, so... And in hip-hop, silence in the booth is louder than silence online. Maybe this is all entertainment for him. Maybe he believes memes beat music in 2026, But here's the thing, rap culture still values stepping up when your name gets called. Because this is hip-hop, this is rap. And right now his name is being called. So the real question isn't who's trolling better at this point. It's who's standing up and who's dropping bars. Because from the outside looking in, T.I. and his family looks unified and they look like they're standing on business. And 50 looks like he's just calculating. Sometimes calculation works actually, but no, sometimes it looks like hesitation. And, I'm not saying 50 is scared. I'm saying this doesn't look like the usual confident, battle-ready 50 people are used to. So does 50 step in the boat, or does this become one of those rare moments where the king of trolling finally ran into a situation that the memes couldn't fix? That's what makes this situation interesting actually, and not the jokes, not the captions anymore, but the silence between the records. And right now that silence is actually loud.